got it. Okay. Welcome to everyone. You are here to talk about back to school anxiety. And if you are here, it is very possible that you are feeling like this, or like this, or like you want to do this. And what I should say, I said you might be feeling, but what I should have said actually is we all are feeling. I am certainly feeling, because as we are doing this, my two children are at school. Today is the first day of school, and we are not virtual here. I am in Louisiana. Louisiana led the United States as a last week. I don't know if it has changed, but the last time I saw stats, we were #1 in per capita cases of COVID-19, and my children are at school right now. So it is, if you're feeling all of those feelings, me too. It is a very nerve-wracking and anxious time. And that this little picture is exactly how I feel. I have, my son is a senior. He is about to turn 18, and I still would like to just do that with him. So if you're feeling that way, some of you probably have kids who are a lot younger than my almost 18-year-old, but you still feel that way even when they're 18. We would just want to scoop them up and hold them and keep them safe. So saying that these are uncertain times is an understatement, obviously. We do not know what's going to happen next. Kids like my kids are returning to real life school. However, at any moment that could change, and I know that. It may go to virtual at any time. Some of you on this call probably have already found out that your school is virtual. And if that is the case, you don't know how long that's going to last. They may have said it's going to last till X date, but as we've seen over and over, things change. If you're doing a hybrid, there's risks with that. If we're worried about our teachers, some of the people possibly on this call, but definitely people that I work with are teachers. And so that the anxiety that they are feeling right now is huge. And there's always seems to be something new. Just when we kind of feel like, okay, this is overwhelming, this is crazy. And then, there's murder hornets, and so it's always something. We don't know what's going to happen next. And we also don't know what the best thing would be. So the latest data I saw, their polling data, said that only 1 in 10 Americans think that school should start without restrictions. So that's fully 90% of us who say we know what we don't want, but there is no consensus at all on what we do want, on what school should look like. And there's still 10% of us that think it should just start as normal. So there's no idea, no general consensus about what the best course of action really is. So of course we are feeling anxious. Of course we are. We're responding to, right now, a lack of information. We're responding to misinformation. Some misinformation is intentional. Some of it is not intentional, but because things are changing, the last bullet on this slide, information is changing. And because the information is changing, we don't know what's right, what we think is the right answer today may be the wrong answer tomorrow. We are learning more about the virus and how people react, and what we thought a month ago is different today. So when we humans experience a whole lot of uncertainty, it triggers our brain in a very predictable way. It's the way we are designed. It is all biology, and it puts us into fight, flight, or freeze. That's basically what anxiety is. It is the amygdala of our brain sending signals out to our body and telling us that we need to get ready to fight, to fly, to run away, or to freeze in place. And if you think about it, we are seeing fight, flight, or freeze everywhere. That is basically what people are doing right now. People are fighting on social media. People are fighting at Target. People are fighting I mean, I laugh. It's not really funny. But it is real. And people are fighting about things that we normally wouldn't fight about because our brains are in this mode to be primed to sense attack and to respond to attack. So we are looking for attack where it may not be. And that is making us all much more likely to, even in our homes and our kids, we're seeing, they're much more likely to argue and to be angry. People are angry because of this fight, flight, or freeze. Flight is escaping, and we see escaping all over the place too. People are escaping into social media. People are escaping into Netflix. People are escaping into the world's largest jigsaw puzzles and paint by number. People are baking bread and pie and all sorts of things that they don't normally do because it is an escape. That is what flight looks like right now. And freeze looks like indecision. And we are seeing so much indecision. I am a coach, and I have so many clients right now who that is kind of the big issue, is just getting out of this extreme indecision. I have a good friend. I'll tell you a story. She's writing a book. It's about anxiety. She's a colleague of mine, another coach, and her book is with the publisher right now, and she has to come up with the subtitle. And I will tell you that I have had, it feels like 700 conversations and text messages about this subtitle. She texts me daily with, what if I change this word? What do you feel about this? Or maybe I should go back to what I had before. And I finally said to her, this isn't just about the subtitle, right? This is anxiety. And sometimes our anxiety about the situation and sending our kids to school and what that's going to look like for us is coming out in indecision about our subtitle or what to have for dinner or all kinds of, decisions that normally we could easily just make and be done with. We are frozen. That's what freeze looks like. And our kids are reacting to all of this too. Our kids, even if they're little and don't necessarily know what's going on, they may not be watching the news, they may not be aware that there's a pandemic, but they are aware that we all are behaving differently. Things are different. We're wearing masks. We're asking them to wear masks. We're not allowing them to just be the way we used to be. We maybe didn't take the vacation we normally take. Lots of things that we normally do, we aren't doing, and the kids are aware of it, even if they aren't aware of all of the scope of what is happening. And for those of you who already know that you are going to be doing virtual school or you are going to be homeschooling, you need to really be aware that the stress and anxiety they are feeling is going to impact them at home. They are more distractible. That is part of the way that they deal with anxiety. They are irritable. That's fight. They're emotional. And when we are in an anxious state, we are unable to learn as well. We don't encode information into our long-term memory as well. There's lots of research on it. So things that are maybe seemed easier for them to catch on to 6 months ago may be a little more difficult for them to learn just because of this underlying state of anxiety that we all find ourselves in right now. So feeling anxious when you face uncertainty, it's scary. It's unsettling, it's disconcerting. But the thing is, we human beings do not like uncertainty. Uncertainty is one of our hardest things to deal with. We always try to control what we can. We try and control things we can't control. We create an illusion of control even if we don't have control. And one thing this pandemic has done to all of us, it has shattered the illusion that we were in control. And that is extremely unsettling. That is not how we like to be in the world. Humans like to have control. Humans like to feel like we know what's going to happen. So it is scary, it's unsettling, and it's also completely normal. As I showed you that picture a couple slides ago of the brain, that's just the way our brains work. When we're feeling extreme uncertainty, an extreme lack of control, our brain is going to do some very predictable things. We are going to feel anxious, and that anxiety is completely normal. It's the way we are built. And before I even go on, and I'm going to, the point of this is to give you some coping strategies, some ideas, some thoughts about how to manage this. I really want to stop and take a moment on this slide and drill this home. Some of you may have actually heard me speak before, and you may have heard me say this before, but it is one of the most important messages I think I say in almost every talk I give, which is anxiety is a normal part of being human. And the reason why that's so important, and I say it in every single talk, is because what we tend to do to ourselves and what our kids do to themselves is, it's a double whammy. We hit ourselves twice. So the first whammy, the first bad thing that happens is we feel anxious. And that feeling of anxious isn't pleasant. It is scary, it's unsettling, it's disconcerting, it's all those, it's a big emotion. So that in and of itself, feeling anxious isn't great. It doesn't feel wonderful. But then we make it worse because we have stories around anxiety. We are telling ourselves, this isn't normal. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm not okay. I should be doing something differently. I'm broken in some way. This is a sign that I am broken. We also say things like, everyone else is handling this, but I'm not. And those are just thoughts, but they are thoughts that make the anxiety worse. They are compounding it. They are the double whammy. So instead of feeling and thinking all those thoughts, the thought that I would love for you to be able to replace and to remind yourself is, this is normal. I am feeling anxious, and this is completely normal. This is how human beings are made. We react in a very predictable way. Our brain is designed this way. It is an adaptive thing. It helps keep us safe in certain situations, but it's normal. It does not mean something is wrong with you. So our anxiety is completely normal. That's probably one of the most important things I'm going to say to you today. And speaking of normal, I jumped into everything about the whole situation without actually telling you about me. And if you noticed on that very first slide, it did say Dr. Tonya Crombie. I do have a PhD in psychology. I am a certified life coach. And just like you, I am a normal mom. These are my two children. As I said, I've got a senior in high school and a junior in high school. And today is their first day. And the reason that I talk about anxiety is not because I have this PhD in psychology and I'm a life coach. It is truly because I have lived with anxiety personally, and because both of my children have struggled with anxiety, because anxiety is a normal part of being human. Everyone struggles with anxiety. It just so happens that one of my children tends to experience it more than others. She is perfect. She is normal. When I say that she struggles with anxiety, I feel like that is no different than if I said to you, I have a child who struggles with asthma. It is just the way her body is made that she tends to feel anxiety a little bit more easily than other kids. But that does not mean, I do not feel like she is broken or flawed or anything like that. It is just who she is. However, At times, because of that, I have had some rough times as a parent dealing with my own anxious child, and that has informed and guided me and made me realize that there's a lot of that there wasn't a lot of support when I was going through it, and there was a lot of need for support because a lot of parents struggle with parenting anxious kids. So that is who I am. That is what I do. That is why I do it. And it is why talking about anxiety in particular is such a passion of mine. And I do it with parents, I do it with teenagers, I do it with kind of whoever will listen to me, really. So that's a little bit about me. But back to what we are talking about. If we've gone over the situation, we all can acknowledge that this is probably, I mean, it is unprecedented times, and it is probably the most anxiety-inducing circumstances that almost all of us have been through. So what should we do? What is a worried mom to do? Well, there are proven ways to build resilience, believe it or not. A lot of us, when you think of resilience, we think of it's a personality trait. It's a thing you're born with. There are certain people who are just resilient and the rest of us aren't. And I am here to tell you, as a coach, that that is not true. That probably the biggest thing that I do as a coach is help people build resilience. Resilience is not something you're born with. It is a set of skills and practices and strategies that when you figure those out, you can become more resilient. And there's all kind of research that says these are things that if you do, you can become more resilient too. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that being resilient does not mean you don't suffer. It does not mean that everything is wonderful for the rest of your life if you're resilient. It just means that when you are resilient, you handle those hard times a little bit better. You bounce back quicker. You manage your emotions. You are able to continue functioning. That's what resilience is. Resilience doesn't mean that the bad things aren't going to happen, because the bad things happen to all of us. But there is some really good science about things that you can do to build resilience. So let's talk about a couple of things that science would tell us we need to do to cope with the anxiety we are all feeling. So the biggest broad topic, the big thing, is that we need a safety net. That the safety net is the key to resilience. And I like to talk about the Golden Gate Bridge when I talk about the safety net, because it's a great analogy for the safety net. So when they were building the Golden Gate Bridge, that was in like the 1930s, and obviously it was a really big deal. They had never built a big suspension bridge over this big body of water like they were building when they built the Golden Gate Bridge. So they didn't really know how to do it, and it's high, it's scary, and it was super, super dangerous. And so the guy who was the engineer behind the Golden Gate Bridge was also a pioneer when it came to safety. And he argued successfully that they had to create this safety net underneath the Golden Gate Bridge as they were building. And that's not something that was normal. That was not something that typically the people who build bridges had had in the past. And obviously it was going to cost money. So the backers and the financial people were against it and said, that's ridiculous, so we don't need it. But what they found was when the bridge builders had this safety net, they could actually build faster. Because obviously, if you were, look at this picture. If you're hanging over the ocean, basically, and there's nothing underneath you, and if you fall, you're not going to survive it. You're going to be super careful. You're going to go pretty slowly because it's pretty dangerous stuff. But once that safety net was there, the bridge builders could build more quickly. It actually was a financial win because the bridge got built more quickly. So that is exactly, that analogy is the analogy we need to apply to our own lives. We sometimes think a safety net is going to take, if I figure out all the things I need to booster my own well-being, that's going to take so much time. It's going to suck time out of my day that I don't have time for. It's going to, it's just too much. I can't do this. And just like with the Golden Gate Bridge, when we put this stuff in place, we actually are more effective. We are more efficient. We are better parents. We are better employees, all of those things. So in order to get through this time, which is super anxiety producing, more than ever, you need a safety net. So what does that safety net entail? What are a couple of things? I'm going to give you 2 things that you definitely need to include in your safety net. And the first one is a squad, just like Taylor Swift. You need a group of people who understand what you are going through. Again, it's sort of counterintuitive because a lot of us, when we feel anxious, when we feel overwhelmed, our intuition is to just withdraw into ourselves because you're so overwhelmed. The thought of having to talk to another person or interact in some way feels like a lot. We also worry about being judged because a lot of us, like I said, we're walking around feeling anxious. We're scrolling through Facebook to escape. And as we scroll through Facebook, it looks like everybody else is having a great time and baking bread and, doing things that we're like, wow, I'm just watching Netflix. Obviously, everybody else is handling this better than I am. And so we don't reach out to our squad because we're afraid that we're going to be judged. So your squad, you need your squad. I write a whole chapter about your squad in my book because it's so important, but it's not everybody gets in the squad. And that's an important thing to realize. There's some criteria that everybody needs to decide who those people are that they're going to share. And I have a whole list, like I said, in my book and in my program, but just on one criteria I want to leave you guys with today is that anyone who doesn't get what you're going through, anyone who you feel like is going to judge you, they shouldn't be in the squad. I'm not saying, kick them out of your life, don't be friends with them. But the squad is really those people that your support system, and your support system should only include people who truly support you. So that's one part of your safety net. You got to have your squad, you got to have your people. And the other thing that we have to have in our safety net are practices. We all need and have certain things that help us cope with anxiety. And the tricky thing is there is no one size fits all set of practices. So one of the things I do in my work, like I said, I help build resilience, is I help people really figure out and identify what are the practices that work best for them. The other thing that's tricky, and I bet you it will apply to some of you, is a lot of us, myself included, I have practices, obviously. I have been honing my practices. I had a really, really rough time with my child at one point, and in order to get through and to be the kind of parent I needed to be, I really had to get serious and be diligent and be methodical about my practices because it was the only way that I was going to stay calm and centered as a mom. However, my practices when this hit, when my kids were suddenly homeschooled, when my husband suddenly was working from home, when I couldn't find toilet paper at the grocery store, I found that my practices weren't working as well as they used to. So some of you may be experiencing that you have had practices and they have worked for years, and suddenly you feel like they're just not as effective as they used to be. And so that requires digging a little deeper. It requires some additional work. It requires figuring out new practices. It's basically saying, I'm sick, I took, the usual antibiotic and it's not working, so I'm going to have to go back and figure out what the new antibiotic is going to take care of this sickness. So it does not mean that your anxiety is incurable. It does not mean that there aren't ways to help, because there totally are. There are things that you can do there are practices that work for all of us. I found additional practices when my old practices weren't really working anymore. But it just takes some trial and error. And a lot of times having some help along the way is great. So those are kind of the big picture things that you can do to help build resilience. And building resilience is really going to be the key. It's the difference between those of us who are struggling but still functioning and those of us who are struggling and just struggling. So those are the things: the safety net, having your squad, finding those practices that are going to help you. However, a lot of, like everything in life, a lot of that is just easier said than done. And so I don't want to send you out with saying, okay, just go do this and everything will be fine. I also want to point out, here's some things that go wrong when people try to build their safety net. Here's where I find people tend to struggle and to stumble with building resilience. So the first way that we kind of stumble is that building resilience means that we are actually doing stuff for us. Like, we are reaching out to our friends. We may be having Zoom calls. We may be, we may be taking time out every single morning to meditate or to exercise every evening or whatever. And in times of stress, in times of uncertainty, in times when our kids are struggling, our instinct, every instinct we have, is to take care of our child. It is the oxygen mask principle. That's why I have the oxygen mask picture here, because every flight you've ever taken, if you've ever been on a flight, you have heard a flight attendant come on the speaker and say, in the event that we lose cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Please secure the mask on yourself before securing it on a child or a young person that you may be traveling with. The reason they tell us that is because, as parents, our instinct is to secure that oxygen mask on our child. Our instinct is, right now, it's a pandemic, it's scary, our kids are confused, our kids aren't getting the same level of education they were. We need to focus all of our attention on our kids. So it's counterintuitive, but just like I said with the Golden Gate Bridge, when we build that safety net, we actually will be better at doing all the stuff we need to do for our children, even though it goes against our instincts. We also have this idea that if we are building our safety net, if we are doing things for ourselves, that's selfish. And we may have even heard that from people. Or we may, and I will say I have done this in the past, so and no judgment if you have, because I certainly have. We have judged other parents. I have thought to myself, geez, I don't know how she has time to work out all the time. I mean, I am here taking care of my kids, and felt, judgmental about the mom who was doing the stuff that she needed to do to be the best mom she could be. So sometimes we get that in our heads. We feel like, my mother-in-law is going to judge me, or my sister's going to judge me. My mom is going to say something. She's going to tell me I'm being selfish. And then we internalize it and say, I am being selfish. But like I said, the safety net is what you need. It's not selfish. And the last way that building that safety net, building the resilience that we all need right now, it is the key. The reason we struggle is because we don't have a good roadmap. When we, this is all new. This is all unprecedented. There aren't a lot of people that we can turn to and say, so remember when you went through that pandemic and you had to homeschool your kids and work a full-time job from home? How did you do that? We just don't have the roadmap for dealing with this. So what I recommend is to, again, look into your squad, look into your trusted circle. And your trusted circle should include some professionals if necessary, but look around for someone who seems to be doing it well, who seems to have some of it figured out, who seems to have some wisdom, somebody who it isn't necessarily, there's nobody who's going to say like, oh, I've been through this pandemic thing before, but there are people who might be a couple steps ahead on the journey than you are, who have gotten through some of these things already, who seem to have some tools and skills and some wisdom that might be helpful. That's where our roadmap is coming from right now. So in the end of it all, the fall is going to arrive whether we're ready for it or not. But if we can create a plan to build resilience, if we can figure out the ways, the techniques, the strategies that work specifically for us, you can find that we will not only survive this, some people, the resilient ones, are actually going to thrive. They are going to come out of this much stronger than they were going in. And the same goes for our children. A lot of what our children are going to take away from this entire experience is what they've seen us model. If our kids have seen us freak out and fall apart, that is what they are going to remember, and that is what they will learn. Oh, so when bad things happen, that's how we are supposed to behave. If they have seen us build resilience, if they have seen us model great coping strategies and great self-care practices, that's what they will learn. When I face hard times, I remember my mom did this. So maybe those are the types of things that you're supposed to do when these things happen. So that is the presentation. And now what I would like to do is I'm going to stop the recording.